Happy Saturday. The weather's a bit crazy where I am right now, so I apologize if you can hear the rain. My podcast studio, my recording studio is outside, and I got a metal roof, so rain tends to be a little bit louder when it happens, but it is what it is. Hopefully it's not coming through that bad on the audio, but we're still streaming. It's Saturday morning. I got my coffee, so hopefully you got your coffee as well. Cheers. Let's pour it up. There we go. Great. Ching ching. Cheers. Drink your coffee, drink your water. It's a blessed day. It's a miracle to be alive. So hopefully you feel that way as well. I got a couple good videos here that we are going to be streaming today. One is a video about, well, at least the title is about why the worst people are so successful. And I think that relates to obviously what's happening today with all the Epstein stuff. So we're going to go through that video and maybe can share some insights on why it seems like some evil people seem to be so successful. And then we're going to look at some of the comments of that video as well. And maybe there's some deeper insights there. And then I recently saw a video that broke down why the Diary of a CEO podcast is so successful. And since I'm a podcaster, I want to check that out, learn from it. My podcast is called Something for Everybody. It's on all major podcast platforms. And so hopefully I can learn something in real time from that breakdown. But the first video will be sort of more relevant to our current times as why the worst people are so successful. I'm assuming there's no like definitive answer, but I guarantee there are some certain traits and characteristics that sort of allow these people who are evil and the worst to sort of flourish in our society. And maybe there's something we can do about it potentially on an individual level. So that's what we got going on today. So let's jump right into the first video.
It's 2016. Uber has spread globally at an unprecedented rate and broken every rule along the way. The company has been illegally surveilling drivers and customers for years. They've violated local laws in dozens of countries and municipalities. They've stolen trade secrets and IP from competitors, and at the time are secretly following journalists who have been critical of the company in an effort to blackmail them. At the center of the storm is Travis Kalanick, a brazen but brilliant CEO and founder who has, despite the mounting pressure, remained relatively unscathed. But another year passes and the wheels come off. Pun totally intended.
Stole about 14,000 confidential files.
Google sues Uber for stealing their trade secrets. The New York Times reports that Uber knowingly misled regulators about their technology. Female employees start filing sexual harassment lawsuits. A video leaks of Kalanick berating an Uber driver.
Kalanick is out entirely, at least as CEO of Uber, reportedly under pressure.
Kalanick is finally pushed out and forced to resign a few months later.
Very hot.
Everything was lost.
I tried everything,
Ooh.
coffee, Pomodoro, and binaural beats, but nothing stuck until I tried this.
Or was it? Nah, let's be serious. Nothing was lost. Kalanick walked away with a sweet-ass $3 billion comp package, got plenty of funding for his other companies, and is now kicking back in his $43 million Beverly Hills mansion, counting his money and laughing about it. You look around and you see this in the world time after time. The liar, the narcissist, the bully, they're not just surviving, they're thriving. They're on the covers of magazines, running billion-dollar companies, and racking up followers and influence. And meanwhile, the honest, kind, decent people, burned out, broke, invisible. If that feels backwards to you, well, it's because it kind of is. And it's not random either. In fact, there's a brutal logic to why the worst people often win in life. And in this video, we're going to get into why. But first, a quick word from the sponsor. Now, let me ask you a question. Are you someone whose calendar is completely stacked with meetings? Do you ever find yourself digging deep into your brain, trying away? Now, granola doesn't just help in the moment. Ever. Granola works for Zoom, Teams, Meet, or even in-person conversations, so that you can have smarter meetings to get more value out of your time. So if this sounds like something you could use, click the link in the description below and check out granola today.
Also, I mean, even before we get started on just what Mark Manson has to say about this, it's like, why do you need the ad, bro? Like, you have nearly 3 million subscribers on YouTube, one of the greatest selling self-help books of all time. Plenty of money is coming in. I think it reduces sort of the sincerity of the video because of the ad. But I guess he's making a ton of money from the ad as well. And maybe it's a product he actually believes in. I hope it is. But, you know, it just seems, I don't know, something that I don't really partake in, but whatever. I also don't have 3 million subscribers on YouTube. So maybe I'm just talking right out of my ass and I don't know anything, but it is what it is. So here we go.
Time we're young, we're taught that the world rewards virtue, being kind, playing fair, helping others. And in early life, that mostly holds up. But that's only because the world we start in is small. When your environment is limited to family, classmates, close friends, altruism actually works. Meaning that when you share and you help others and you're being considerate, you're not only showing good manners, you're practicing a strategy that is nurturing your development. In this way, your reputation is built on your character. You learn that doing good often leads to getting good back. And for a while, that is true. But then things start to scale up. As we become adults, we move into larger systems, corporations, governments, fucking TikTok, and we realize that the old rules start to break down. The feedback loops that once rewarded virtue become distorted or lost. You see, our moral instincts were designed for small groups where harm was immediate, visible, and personal. But when you scale things up, when you add
I mean, I don't know what else he's going to say in this video, but I do wholeheartedly believe that doing good work, you get good stuff back. I wholeheartedly believe in that. Now, there may be a longer time horizon. You may have to work a little bit harder and a little bit longer to see sort of the fruits of your labor. And also there's an element of like when I lay my head down on my pillow at night next to my wife and my son and all these types of things, I know that I'm living an ethical and moral life. And I think that has a lot to do with our sanity as well. And that has a lot to do with our fulfillment and our happiness in life. And I think that's also important. But then we see all these people who are evil and manipulate and gaslight, have tons and tons and tons of success. And we think, well, I'm trying to do things right. Why are they so far ahead of me? And then we start to alter and change who we are to sort of mold ourselves into those types of people. And then we look in the mirror 10, 15 years down the line and we're someone we don't even recognize. Then there's totally beyond the pale of evil people who think what they're doing is right or don't even care what they're doing. Those are evil, 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 evil people. I'm saying people who kind of manipulate and game the system, then 20 years down the line are lonely, alone, have nothing to show for it, but they have lots of money. Is it really worth it? I don't know. That's for you to decide for yourself, I guess.
Distance, complexity, and layers of abstraction, those instincts start to fail. Imagine seeing a child in front of you being forced into slave labor. You'd probably feel immediate outrage and try to do something. But now imagine that same child hidden behind global supply chains, company logos, and a sleek online storefront. Oh, and also 5,000 miles away, and your attention is not on exploitation anymore. Instead, it's on the shiny new product that's 10% off. Human attention is limited, and we can only focus on a few things at a time, usually things that we can see or people that we can talk to. So when confronted with global complexity, our minds lose track of everything. We check out mentally. It's too hard to think about the child labor in Africa or the actions of the Russian government. You just want to buy a fucking watch. This is how moral clarity gets diluted. Emotional feedback, which usually helps us sense what's right from wrong, gets lost in the infinite complexity of our modern systems. As a result, our natural ethical signals become very faint. And when they do come through, our attention shifts, not towards what's most right or wrong, but towards what's loudest and most visible. This is why the moral outrages of the day are usually completely detached from reality. More people die of coal pollution each year than all of nuclear power accidents combined across human history. Yet environmentalists are protesting nuclear reactors and not the coal plants. This is the brutal truth. In these large-scale systems, people only care about what is the loudest and commands the most attention. And by constantly being distracted by what is loud, we open the door for those who are extremely good at manipulating attention and taking advantage of inattention. The egomaniacs, the narcissists, and the tyrants.
Whoa.
What's that?
I just built a budgeting app in Base 44.
Guys, need it.
In the early 15...
I mean, prime examples nowadays, like at least in the political space, are like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, who lie and gaslight and manipulate and use the guise of like half truths and I know what's right to sort of draw their audience in and manipulate them and lie to them and virtue signal and show unearned moral virtue, that they're the sort of the paragons of truth and value, and really they're kind of doing the opposite, but it's gained them millions of followers and millions of dollars. which is kind of the status and social currency of our day to day, is like in the attention economy. And so people look up to them for some odd reason, even though we don't really know the texture of their mind, the fabric of their relationships, which is really the most important thing. But we see a public persona that we're like, oh, I want to be like that, so I must follow this or lie about this or manipulate you here or gaslight you here, because that's how you gain social status, when really that's obviously not true. And so, yeah, let's keep going.
Hundreds, Niccolo Machiavelli lived in a world steeped in corruption and political upheaval. Unlike today, Renaissance Italy didn't have the glossy corporate veneer of an HR department or DEI codes of conduct. It had poisonings, public executions, secret alliances, and political backstabbing. No, like actual fucking backstabbing. But despite the dangerous conditions he lived in, he wasn't just some armchair philosopher scribbling in isolation. Machiavelli was deep in the trenches, advising princes and kings. For over a decade, he served as a senior diplomat and advisor to the Florentine Republic, negotiating with popes, kings, mercenaries, basically anyone who held the reins of power. And through it all, he saw how the game was actually played. Power, he realized, didn't reward virtue. It rewarded instinct, survival, and cunning. Power didn't favor the best or most morally upright men. It favored the last one standing, usually over someone else's dead body. And so, from this brutal landscape, Machiavelli offered a conclusion that still makes people squirm. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Machiavelli pointed out something everyone saw, but
it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Scary how much truth there is in that. Scary how much truth there is in that. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both.
didn't really want to see. The higher you climbed in the rungs of power, the more amoral you had to become. And the same traits that harm you locally can potentially reward you globally. Of course, nobody liked hearing this, so they killed Machiavelli and tortured him until he gave up names. No, just kidding. He actually had a stomach virus. Anyway, as Nietzsche later put it, terribleness is part of greatness. Let us not deceive ourselves.
Terribleness is part of greatness. Let us not deceive ourselves. I don't know. I don't want to agree with that. I want to agree with the fact that maybe being obsessive to an unhealthy degree is part of greatness. Talent is part of greatness. Work ethic, a little bit of luck is part of greatness. I don't think terribleness has to be part of greatness. I don't think they go hand in hand. I know plenty of people, plenty of athletes and entertainers and all these types of people, business people, parents, right, who have become great and did it the right way. I know tons of them. And so, yes, some people are terrible. Some people do evil shit and they get to greatness. But that's not the formula. The secret formula is grit and effort and a vision for your future and falling down when you get back up. We don't have to follow the path of people who did evil shit just because they achieved something that we want to achieve. And so I don't agree with Nietzsche here that terribleness is part of it. Like that's a declarative statement. It can be, for some people it is, but I think there's other ingredients to greatness that are far more important and far more moral and make us feel better about how we achieve that greatness. Let's continue.
So I'd like to take a moment and discuss some of these traits that make you a horrible person to your friends and family, but actually might make you a billionaire or prime minister if you play your cards right. In psychology, they've identified 3 of these strategic personalities. Together, they are called the dark triad. Machiavellianism is about strategic control, or the willingness to manipulate people and fuck with their heads. People high in Machiavellianism are willing to lie, cheat, or steal if they believe that they can get away with it. They will mislead you, create drama to benefit themselves, turn you against the people you care about, divide and conquer. Narcissism, by contrast, is fueled by self-importance and the hunger for recognition. The narcissist is self-obsessed and deluded in their own high self-regard. They believe that not only is everything about them, but everything should be about them because, look how fucking awesome they are. And finally, psychopathy is perhaps the most famous and the worst of the dark triad. It's marked by a complete emotional detachment, a lack of empathy, and a really conspicuous boldness under pressure. Psychopaths don't really feel fear the same way they don't feel love, and they accrue the costs and benefits that come with both of those. In a brutal and competitive environment, this can look like clarity and focus, even strength. I mean, think about Steve Jobs. He wasn't a psychopath in a clinical sense, but he was certainly somebody who embodied a lot of psychopathic traits in business. He fired people for saying the wrong thing in a meeting. He exploded at employees for even the most minor of mistakes. He ridiculed other people's ideas regularly.
I already fired you! Why are you still here?
A former Apple employee once recalled, he didn't want to just win, he wanted to crush you. And then he acted like it was your fault. Each of these traits reflects a distinct psychological strategy, a way of navigating systems that are too vast, too impersonal, and too competitive for old school virtue to consistently succeed. And no, they aren't exactly healthy or moral, but in certain environments, they can be very effective. But let's start with the bad news. People high in these traits are, in fact, overrepresented in positions of power, as CEOs, politicians, and major media figures.
I made a react.
Logan Paul shout out. Logan Paul shout out. Let's go.
And here's the good news. They're also overrepresented in prisons, because that's basically the deal. These are the high-risk, high-reward personality traits. They help you thrive in a large, complex system, but they don't pan out well in stable ones that require cooperation, trust, or long-term emotional support. In other words, what may help you win in the jungle is what gets you exiled from the village. This is another flaw of our perception. Sure, we notice the narcissistic CEO or the egomaniacal celebrity not because they're common, but because their rise is loud, public, and cinematic. What we don't see are the thousands and thousands of people with the same arrogance, the same disregard for social norms, who crash and burn without anyone noticing. Most narcissists don't be.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a high risk, sort of high reward strategy that sometimes pays off, and you see those people in the public eye when it does pay off. But I talked to a narcissist specialist on my podcast, and she, astutely said that everyone has a little bit of narcissism in them. It all depends on the spectrum and how you display it and how you control it and how you use it. There are a ton of professional athletes who have a version of obsessiveness about their craft. So I think all of these traits, there's a little bit of them in all of us. It depends on the spectrum we're on, how they connect. Like, someone like Epstein, right, who's in the news a lot because the Epstein files and all this stuff, horrible stuff that he did. He had a combination of all three because he was the worst kind of person that's ever existed. Those types of people do have all of those traits, and they can acquire, I guess, a lot of wealth, but it's horrible, and they destroy people along the way, and they bring people in with them and destroy their lives too. And it's like, that's the worst kind of someone. But I think a lot of potentially successful people have little bits of those pieces in them, but you don't see the people who crash and burn because of it. High risk, high reward strategy. So there is another way. There is a better way. Yes, it takes a longer time. Yes, it may maybe take more hard work and a little bit more luck and some help along the way, but you're going to feel much more better about yourself when you get there, when you reach that. You're like, yes, I did it with people. I brought people up with me. This is amazing. This is how it should be. Not that I had to destroy and step on everyone on the way up. That's not how life is. We're social, relational beings, and we want to bring people up with us. And so I think it's important to understand these characteristics, and that some people do possess little bits of them, but that's not the way forward. At least that's how I think. Let's keep going. Sorry about the
icons. They get.
I don't know if you can hear it come through, but it's really loud and almost kind of distracting me as I speak. So we'll see.
Fired and dumped. Most Machiavellians don't outplay the game. They get caught and banned from coming back. Most psychopaths don't build empires. They wreck their own lives and the lives of those around them. Our bias makes it so that the failure doesn't trend, only the successes. And that's how our minds get tricked.
That's an important statement. Our minds get tricked that the failure. What did he say? Let's go back 1 second.
Empires. They wreck their own lives and the lives of those around them. Our bias makes it so that the failure doesn't trend, only the successes.
The failure doesn't trend, only the successes. So we have to be very clear on how this can lead to your absolute downfall. And that's what we need to be talking about, because the failures don't trend, the successes do. That's a really good line there by Mark.
And that's how our minds get tricked. By overvaluing the few visible winners, we start to believe that these traits work more often than they actually do. That said, even among the few who do seem to win by wielding their dark triad traits, much of the truth is still hidden. They rise through manipulation, ego, and ruthlessness, yet I would argue that these people aren't really winning. Why? Because behind closed doors, they are very likely miserable, lonely sacks of shit who fucking hate themselves and are this close to sticking their head in a plastic bag or sucking on a tailpipe in their 7 Bugatti garage. But don't take my word for it, because we actually have research on this. Elizabeth Holmes was too good to be true. A supposed...
I love that title, Why They Lose Even When They Win. This is exactly what I was saying. It's not worth it. These people are not actually living the life that you want to live. It just seems like they are. It just seems like they are. There is a better way, and I'm glad Mark is going to go into that.
Stanford prodigy who dropped out to start a revolutionary biotech company, she convinced her own business professor to become her first investor. At long last, she was the female wunderkind of Silicon Valley that they had been waiting for. A brilliant, confident, visionary woman who could finally redefine what a startup CEO and billionaire would look like. Her product was also too good to be true. It promised things that were literally scientifically impossible. But Holmes didn't care. She faked the test cases at pitch meetings, she lied about the results, and she just forced her narrative down everybody's throats. And what happened? Well, investors lined up. The media swooned, former presidents joined the board. Basically, everything held up until it didn't. After 12 years, the lie finally got out. A public journalist exposed in 2015 that Holmes and her company were in fact too good to be true. Now, what Holmes' story shows us, along with Kalanick's, is that success built on a dark triad personality is never stable. When you treat people like tools or threats or just dirt, you don't build character, you build blind spots. In Holmes' case, it was delusions of grandeur.
Yes, good point. If you build your life around those 3 sort of dark triad characteristics, it's all going to crumble at some point. It has to. There's no other way around it. That's how sort of let's say the circle of life works. Now, it may seem great at the beginning and they have success and fame and money and fortune, but it all comes crumbling down. So why not choose the other path? The more moral, ethical path that builds character and relationships and makes the world a little bit better than you found it. Why not do that?
This is because when your identity is tied to achievement, there's no moral compass. Instead, your life's navigation system is solely driven by metrics and output. And over time, that corrodes you. This brings us to an uncomfortable truth. What gets sacrificed on the road to success at all costs isn't just trust, connection, or reputation, it's guilt. And that's where the real unraveling begins. Because here's the thing most dark triad personalities never realize. It's that chasing success without integrity doesn't just damage others, it damages themselves. And not by making them feel guilt, but rather by making them incapable of feeling guilt at all. Now, you might think a life without guilt would actually be pretty awesome, maybe even an advantage, but it's not. Psychologist Steve Stewart Williams says that guilt may have started as a simple prompt to repay social debts, but it's evolved to do much more. It's our internal alarm system, warning us that we're on the edge of self-destruction. And so this tells us...
Yes, guilt and shame are extremely powerful motivators for us to try and do the right thing. If you feel shameful or guilty about your behavior, you're going to try and repair it or do something about it or hold yourself accountable. If you never feel those things, then you're never going to try and be better or become better. A Machiavellianist, either way, or someone who has psychopathy or someone who's a narcissist, right? You're not going to feel those things, so you're not going to care about how you treat others and even how you treat yourself, because you're going to be filled with all that guilt and shame, but you're blocking it or removing it, or you don't even feel it. So it's like a very, very powerful, all the emotions that humans feel are powerful and are a signal. And people in the dark triad just don't feel those things. And it ruins their relationships, but more importantly, it ruins themselves and their soul. And eventually, they have to fucking pay up for that shit.
Why the dark triad personalities are the truly dangerous ones. It's because they're those who train themselves not to feel guilt. There's no feedback loop. There's no learning that happens from their mistakes. Because they never feel that they did something wrong, they never have to correct their actions in the future. Instead, they shut those feelings off. And sure, for a while, that might work. It might give them some confidence, some boldness, an ability to move forward without flinching. But when they finally do get caught, guilt comes crashing back. And it doesn't come alone. It comes with backup, like shame, fear, and regret. So yes, you can succeed without integrity and listening to your guilt, but you will eventually pay for it. And history and mythology are replete with examples of these sorts of cautionary tales. From Oedipus Rex to Citizen Kane, the fucking Hitler. They show that when
Using a toothbrush is my least favorite way to clean retainers. I use the dental pod.
If you wear your retainer every night, like
Thank you.
winning the global game of power often means forfeiting the local game of any connection or meeting. But there is good news. You can still win without being a sociopathic, narcissistic fuckboy. And it's actually not that hard to figure out how. At the start of the video, I talked about how rigged the system can feel, how the worst people seem to rise while good people get ignored. And I also mentioned a reframe that could help. It's understanding and accepting that morality is a localized strategy. It evolved to work in small personal networks. So naturally, when the system grows too big or too impersonal, our moral instincts can start to misfire. But that doesn't mean we throw these instincts out entirely. It means that we adapt. We get smarter about how and when to use our virtues. So the real challenge here isn't becoming like the worst people, it's learning what they get right about power and visibility without sacrificing your integrity and your fucking soul. Point number 1, empathize less. This sounds cold, but stay with me. Empathy, like morality, evolved as a local tool. It's designed to be narrow and immediate, meaning you can only truly empathize with one person at a time. And that makes sense in a tribal life. You needed to feel what your group felt, to react to the same threats, to signal loyalty to your friends and family. But empathy also has a downside. It narrows your field of vision. In contrast, think of how it feels when you confide in a...
I mean, this is kind of the idea of Gad Sad, where he talks about suicidal empathy, where we have empathy for everyone all the time, that it kind of forces us to do stupid shit that doesn't make sense, that's not really moral, but it's guised under the sort of under the rubric of empathy. And so, yeah, I want to have empathy for specific things in certain situations, my wife, you know, people that are close to me. But if it grows to every single person on the planet, then it becomes suicidal empathy. And then I actually start doing things in a worse way that aren't beneficial to the people that I'm actually trying to help. And so I think, you know, maybe I'm, crossing too many ideas there, but I think that makes sense between Mark and what Gad Sad has said also about suicidal empathy.
Friend about being hurt, and instead of validating your pain, instead of empathizing, they start defending the person who wronged you. It stings, and you feel betrayed. But ironically, that kind of perspective taking is exactly what we need in a large-scale system. What we need isn't more emotional immediacy, it's more compassion. Mm-hmm. Unlike empathy, compassion is broader. It lets you hold more.
Yeah, I think like empathy in certain situations obviously is really, really, really important. You're talking to a loved one, someone close, right? But I think compassion is more important. And I think sort of the next idea after that would be tolerant, right? Tolerant for other people's ideas, a tolerance for other people's, shortcomings or the life they've lived or the trauma they have. Just trying to be able to not sort of put yourself in their shoes, because that's empathy, but just like being okay with it, being compassionate about it, being tolerant about it, I think also is extremely important. So I definitely think Mark is right there.
Multiple perspectives at the same time. It shifts you out of raw emotion and into a rational discernment, exactly where you need to be when navigating complex social systems, where the stakes are high and the relationships are not always personal. Say a colleague is struggling. Empathy might have you drop everything to help them, to feel what they feel, to fix it. But compassion lets you pause. It gives you time to let your values weigh in the decision-making, to ask yourself, what's actually helpful here? What's the right amount of fucks to give? Is this even my problem? Am I perhaps enabling more of the problem? It's like watching someone fall and sink in the quicksand. Empathy immediately dives in after them. Compassion goes and finds a rope. In this kind of competitive world, strategic compassion and not reactive empathy is the skill that allows you to care without being consumed, to act with integrity without losing effectiveness.
He said reactive empathy versus strategic compassion. I like that framing. Reactive empathy versus strategic compassion. Let's remember that and use that in our own lives.
In this way, you're able to adopt an aspect of the dark triad without going fully evil yourself. Number 2, stop seeking universal approval.
Yeah.
One of the most self-destructive traits you can carry into a competitive environment is the need for constant external validation. And the tricky part, it often wears a
It's 100% fact that not everyone is going to like you. That's 100% fact. And it makes sense because me and you don't even like everyone. So why would everyone like us if we don't even like everyone? And so if we can sort of let go of that fact, I think there should be respect for everyone for the most part. I think everyone is made in the divine image of God, of course, but we're not going to like everyone. We're not going to vibe with everyone. And so why would there be this sort of force or this need for everyone to like us? And I think trying to let go of that, working hard to do the work to let go of that is a quite a freeing sort of feeling also. Yeah. So anyways, let's keep going.
Guys, it can look like kindness, cooperation, and humility, but underneath, it's just plain neediness. Here's an uncomfortable truth for you. Wanting everyone to like you is itself a subtle form of narcissism. It's another version of making everything in the world about yourself.
Like I said, the narcissism expert that I had on my podcast, subtly said that everyone has a little bit of narcissistic traits in them. It's all on a spectrum, and where they fall on that spectrum and how they display that sort of grandiose or vulnerable narcissism. Again, my podcast is called Something for Everybody. If you want to check that out, and wherever you're watching right now, please do like and subscribe. Cheers. Let's keep going.
Paradoxically, it is only when you find reasons that you're willing to be disliked that you will finally be able to stop living for yourself and do the right thing for the sake of doing the right thing. Number 3, learn when to speak up, even when you're uncertain. I say this because, as we talked about, the world doesn't reward who's right, it usually rewards who is seen. And there's real science behind that. It's when our brains assume that the person who talks the most must be the leader. In group settings, we subconsciously assign power to whoever commands the floor, regardless of what they're actually saying. That means in meetings, debates, even casual conversation, the one who speaks the most often will usually walk away perceived as the most competent. And not because they had the best ideas, but because they risked the most ideas and they had the most airtime. So what does this mean for you? It means you can't afford to stay quiet. If you have ideas, fucking say it. If you disagree, voice it. Because staying silent to avoid being wrong is how you get overlooked. But speaking up is how you get seen, remembered, and respected. If you're unsure, speak anyway. Isaac Newton, the same guy who redefined physics, spent 30 years obsessed with alchemy, a fucking pseudoscience. He wrote over 1 million words on it. And the reason you never hear about this is because it was fucking stupid. Arguably the smartest man who ever lived spent most of his adult life on a pseudoscience, and nobody remembers it or cares because his few good ideas were so great, nothing else mattered. So here's the lesson. One great idea will undo the damage of 1,000 bad ones. And until you speak up, you'll never know which of those ideas are the great ones. It's kind of like YouTube videos. Sometimes you gotta make 100 of them just to figure out which ones are actually worth watching, which is why you should watch this one. It's pretty great too.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. No, that was good. That was a good video. I've been watching more Mark Manson videos. I did a stream and reacted to one maybe a couple weeks ago, and then I've been sort of stumbling upon his videos more recently, and he does really good videos. I think he adds a lot of text on the screen and graphics and things like that to make it easier to understand. I sometimes think there's a lot going on, but obviously he has a video editor and someone who puts together these videos. It's really good. He has a lot of subscribers on YouTube. I like the way he says things. He's clear. He's straight to the point. And I did enjoy that video. And it does give you some insight on why certain sort of evil or manipulative people become successful, is because they're part of this sort of dark triad characteristic. Some people have one, some people have two, some people have all three. Those are kind of the most evil, kind of worst people that we've ever seen in the world. I mentioned Epstein. He's obviously one of those people. But maybe we see that. We see success. We see ego. We see narcissism. We see manipulation and gaslighting. We're like, oh, I can use those traits to become that type of success. It doesn't work. It all comes crumbling down at some point because you damage others and you damage yourself and your soul so much that it has to all crumble. So why not choose a better path, the more moral and ethical path where we can still win and not lose ourselves in the process? That is the way forward. That's how we be the best version of ourselves in greatest service to the world. And that's also how we leave the world a little bit better than we found it. So again, thank you, Mark Manson. Appreciated that video. Now let's jump in. I just saw this video just right before I came on this stream about sort of a 10-minute breakdown about why the Diary of a CEO is so successful as a podcast. So I want to learn so I can, grow my podcast as well. So let's fucking watch it. Here we go. Let me share. And we're going to start jumping in. Here we go. Bye-bye. Boom.
Wrong.
Weird.
Anyways.
Crack. Angry.
Problem stamina.
Bad.
Nope. Extinction.
Diary of a CEO is a weird show. The thumbnails are often pretty trashy. They're lying. They want us to be sick. If a nuke drops, here's what happens. A lemon will fix your erections. But the interviews are actually very sophisticated, even life-changing. The topics are all over the place. Financial advice, societal collapse, foot health, sugar consumption, celebrities. But they consistently bring in millions of views, not just once a week, but twice a week. To get over 14 million subscribers and 1 billion views on YouTube alone, Diary of a CEO has to be doing a lot of things right.
So many people copy our thumbnails now, for example, because they think that must be it. So many people copy the trailers, they think that must be it, but it's not that.
The question is, what is it then? For the last month, I went down a rabbit hole to try to answer that question and break down the invisible machine behind the show. And what I discovered is that what makes this podcast one of the best in the world isn't what you see. It's what you don't. A lot of people think Diary of a CEO succeeded because Stephen Bartlett was rich and he was famous. Because, I mean, he was rich, and he was pretty famous.
Founder of a marketing empire that's become one of the world's most influential social media companies is the den's youngest ever dragon, Stephen Bartlett.
But then I found something that pretty much proved this wrong.
Kim Kardashian launched a new criminal justice reform podcast this week.
The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have joined forces with Spotify.
Addison Rae just launched a podcast exclusively on Spotify.
Former President Barack Obama teaming up with one of America's biggest rock stars for a new podcast.
From 2018 to 2021, Spotify bet the farm on the idea that famous people equals successful podcasters. They poured hundreds of millions of dollars into deals with celebrities. But that bet did not pay off.
Harry and Meghan's estimated $25 million podcast deal canceled after less than a year.
The Obama's production company is moving to Audible after a 3-year run with Spotify.
This is one of the most sort of invigorating and encouraging things as an independent podcaster is like, you can spend so much money on quote unquote famous people having a podcast, but you can't force people to listen. You can spend money, you can promote it, you can put ads out there. But if the conversations aren't real, the conversations aren't organic, and the conversations aren't helpful, it doesn't matter how much you put out there or how famous the person is. People you can't go to their house and force them to play and download and watch the whole thing. That's what's so cool about the attention economy or the podcast space. Is like, eventually the cream will rise to the top. Now, there are some manufacturing that you can do inside the podcast space. You can put out a bunch of episodes. You can have great advertisement. You can spend money on marketing and you can fake some downloads here and there. But real, actual listeners, like what the Diary of a CEO has done and Modern Wisdom has done or Joe Rogan has done, it's like those are real people getting real value from the conversation so they can change their life. And you can't force that. That's an organic reach. And so for someone who's an independent podcaster who does all of this shit on his own with, a couple people on my team, that's really kind of exciting. I have 457 podcasts. We just passed, 1 million downloads on audio. We cracked sort of the top 25 on Apple Podcasts in the education category. And I've been doing this for, June will be 6 years, and people are just starting to pay attention now. Some podcasts sort of spring up very quickly, like Huberman's podcast and the Diary of a CEO did. But I'm willing to play the long game for the long haul. And so it's cool to see that you can't just sort of buy your way into the podcasting market. Here we go. Let's continue.
So while being rich and famous helps with everything, it doesn't explain how Stephen was able to rise to the top of the podcast mountain. So I decided to go back to the very beginning, to the fall of 2017, when Stephen records his first ever podcast. The first 5 episodes weren't really the show you hear today.
Every Sunday, I'm going to share my personal diary with you, and I want to give you an insight into what it's like behind the scenes, being an entrepreneur.
But that didn't last long. Around episode 6, Stephen started interviewing people. And so I went back and I actually listened to those early stripped down episodes before he had the fancy gear and famous guests and huge team. And what I found surprised me, because even back then, Stephen was actually a pretty good interviewer. He didn't commit any of the usual mistakes that beginners make, like talking too much about himself or asking questions just to sound smart. But there was one thing that he got way better at. First though, let's look at what kind of interviewer Stephen actually is. Roughly speaking, there are 3 types of interviewers.
Hey there. Welcome to Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend.
Welcome to Armchair Expert. I'm Dak Shepard.
Yeah.
The friend interviewer puts their guest at ease, and it feels like a hangout. Then you have the second type.
Bradley Pitts, thanks for joining me.
It's my pleasure.
I'm quite picky, so I wouldn't have asked you if I wasn't in love with you.
Here we are at Neptune Records, waiting for Tyler, the creator.
The weirdo interviewer cuts through the usual boring celebrity talking points. It's hard to act normal when the person interviewing you isn't normal. In both cases, the interviewer is part of the show. The friend talks a lot. Joe Rogan will jump in with,
I don't remember what happened, but she started throwing punches at me. And I'm like, what the
With the weirdo interviewer, the guest can be almost boring because the interviewer is the entertainment.
I feel like there's quite fiery energy between us.
Oh, no, don't get it.
But Stephen Bartlett doesn't belong to either category. He falls into a third type, part of a long tradition of interviewers like Larry King or James Lipton, the invisible interviewer.
How did that happen? Why do they hang around?
Okay, that's a pretty good question. I guess
When the spaceship lands, how do they communicate?
That's a very good question. I like that.
This type of interviewer is a magic trick. When it's done really well, all you see is the guest. Under the surface, though, there's a lot going on. So let's get into that. When you listen to Stephen's interviews with celebrities these days, his opening is almost always the same.
Louis, to understand you, what is the earliest context that I need? Trevor, what are the most important things that I need to understand about your earliest years? For you to be the way that you are, there must be some kind of early context.
So this doesn't seem that remarkable. It's a pretty obvious starting point. But look at how he used to ask this question. This is the transcript from one of Stephen's early interviews before he was even on YouTube. Look at how long it takes him to ask the first question.
Tom, thank you so much for inviting us into your amazing podcast. Your content as well is hugely inspiring. Inspiration and knowledge.
It's actually really cool to watch this. This is a fucking great video so far. No wonder why I think this person has a little over 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, and this video already has 25K. No wonder. It's a great video. It should be doing well. And I have a feeling that this person's channel is going to blow up. So that's awesome. And it's cool because, like, you know, sometimes when I'm feeling a little unmotivated or like, man, none of the videos are hitting or whatever the case may be, when I get sort of too metric or outcome focused, when I should be focused on the process and the conversations, on getting better, on my interview style, on the way I communicate, on how I articulate. I went back and I looked at Pat McAfee's, first YouTube video. And it's like, boom, 8 years ago, the setup, the mics, all this stuff, or Joe Rogan's back in the day. It's cool to see, Stephen Bartlett's back in the day when podcasts were just audio. Mine used to be just audio, just like most people, but now video is so important. That's why I built the studio, in my backyard. There's a studio I rent out close to my house when I have a guest come through. And it's cool where it's grown, and also how the interview process has grown, how comfortable you feel with silence, when to, intervene or when to not intervene. These things can only be learned through time under tension. And not that I listen to every episode of The Diary CEO. I've really probably only watched or listened to a couple full episodes where I enjoy the guest. But Stephen obviously does a great job. His podcast is very, very, very successful. And so there's obviously a ton to learn from him in terms of podcasting and that kind of interview style.
My question, I guess, where did you come from?
It takes him 44 seconds just to get that question out. Now it only takes him 5 seconds. But that's not the only difference. If you ever listen to some of the great invisible interviewers, it's not just how tight their questions are, it's also the focus. Remember the question Stephen asked?
Where did you come from?
Listen to how confused his guest is by that question.
Where did I come from? Well, I grew up in Tacoma, Washington. So...
Respectfully, nobody cares about that. And so Stephen changed the question so that it nudges people into a more interesting answer. What do I need to know about your earliest context to understand you now? All right, so the questions got tighter, they got better, but there's another key to the invisible interviewer.
Research. Study.
Research has always been a huge part of any interview. The more you know about a person, the more interesting answers you get. Even Joe Rogan, who is probably one of the chillest interviewers, still does a lot of research.
If I have an important subject and I don't understand it too much, I'll read someone's book, watch documentary. I love things like the UFO subjects because I don't have to do any preparation.
But the king of research has to be
Guns Garcia.
Yo, you know too much.
Narwhal, how?
How the fuck do you know that? Wow. How the fuck do you know about?
Yeah, how do you know?
You got hell of a research, bro.
So let's look at how Diary of a CEO does their research. One way to understand what makes the show special is to listen to other interviews their guests did. Take this mafia boss. He'd been interviewed dozens of times before he went on Diary of a CEO. His most popular interview was probably this one on BuzzFeed. And the most viral moment in that video?
Never have I ever killed someone. Oh, boy.
It was the most watched, most commented on, but the answer he gives is honestly pretty lame and generic.
I will tell you this, that life is a very violent life. Murder in that life was taken very seriously.
I'm pretty sure we all know that murder is taken seriously in mob life. I mean,
just speaking on the research part, as an independent podcaster, I think research is the most time-consuming part, right? Because I want to be really, really well prepared for my interviews, but I'm solo by myself. So, I'm reaching out to the guest, I'm booking the guest, then I'm reading the book about the guest, and I'm doing a couple interviews a week because I release a bunch of podcast episodes. And so that could be very time-consuming, especially when you do a bunch of research for something. You have a great interview or a great podcast and no one fucking watches it or listens to it. That's kind of the in the trenches journey of growing your podcast. Now, I think Stephen Bartlett has a research team. I know Logan Paul does, and they maybe get like a one-sheeter with things like that. I think Joe Rogan still does his research. I think Tim Ferriss still does his own research, and I think Chris Williamson does as well, and things like that. But I think there is a fine line between knowing way too much about the person, where you already know the answer they're going to ask, so it doesn't feel organic. Kind of like Mel Robbins and Jay Shetty really just ask sort of generic questions, and their interviews are very formulaic and really boring. And then not knowing anything about the guest could make for an interesting conversation, but there's some stuff that you should know that sort of lands you in the middle ground sweet spot where you ask interesting questions and hoping to get a different answer than you've heard before, which expands the conversation, which I think is really where the juice is at. At least that's how I see it, from doing almost 500 podcast episodes.
I've seen movies. So people were interested in the topic, but the interview didn't really deliver. And so when Steven interviews him, he makes sure to ask him 3 probing questions just to try to get him to talk as much as possible about that moment that he knows people are interested in.
You've never talked about having to kill someone, have you?
No.
Why is that?
It's just not a subject I care to get into.
When I read that, I thought maybe it's because might be legal retribution, but I wondered why.
It's honestly totally worth watching. I mean, at one point he says,
I don't have immunity for anything that I've done in the past.
I'm just going to say, that definitely means he didn't not do it. So that's one way that Diary of a CEO makes sure their guest gives interesting answers, by watching the other interviews and mining them for greatest hits.
I was thinking about Lewis Howes, and you had a conversation with him. It's something that I've heard you talk about before. I've heard you say before that the most important the things I heard you talk about are, this sort of...
And that's the second technique Steven uses as the invisible interviewer. I kind of think of it as the rock concert technique, because he's basically figuring out what the guest's greatest hits are and then structuring the interview so they can play those answers. But even the best answers don't matter if people click away. And that's where retention comes in. There's a lot of complicated theories out there about retention. But if you just replace retention with attention, you'd understand more than 99% of people. What I noticed about Diary of a CEO is that even if I wasn't that interested in the topic or the guest, I'd pay attention to most of the 2-hour-long episode. But when I listened to a lot of other podcasts, sometimes I'd find myself zoning out. And it wasn't until I actually watched a Diary of a CEO episode that I understood what was going on. This is what the chapters look like for an average episode. Probably doesn't look that significant until you compare it to what other podcasts look like. Lewis Howes averages 5 minutes per chapter. My First Million clocks in around 4. Chris Williamson is averaging 10 minutes per chapter. But Diary of a CEO is averaging 2 minutes per idea. And that's the third technique Steven's using as an invisible interviewer. Without anyone realizing it, he's subtly moving people along the breadcrumb trail of ideas.
Say I was trying to sell you something. What is it that you think you know that the average person doesn't know about? Do you have a system or a framework?
2 minutes per idea means that each section is close to the length of a YouTube short. So people aren't really watching a 2-hour interview. They're watching a playlist of carefully chosen, carefully paced clips. Those are just some of the techniques that Steven Bartlett uses to make Diary of a CEO one of the most listened to podcasts in the world. But here's the thing. As good as Steven's interviews are, and they are really good, it doesn't matter if nobody knows about them. And that's when I stumbled upon one of the weirdest parts about Diary of a CEO. Over the years, Stephen has had some pretty famous guests on.
Oh boy.
I know a scam when I see one.
Fun question.
But one night I started looking at their top 10 most popular episodes, and I realized something. Almost none of them are the famous guests. These videos all got tens of millions of views, yet it's one of the most random collections of people I've seen in a while. I mean, look at this guy. I've never heard of him before. Yet he got more views than the world's biggest YouTube star, one of the most famous actors, and the highest paid comedian all put together. So the question is, how is Diary of a CEO convincing millions of people to click on someone they've never heard of before? This is obviously pretty far down the rabbit hole, but if you're interested in it, I put together what I figured out about their thumbnails in a PDF below. For something totally different, watch this. For something similar, click on this.
I am certainly going to download that PDF down below because that was one of the best videos I've watched in terms of breaking that down. It was awesome to learn from that. I'm probably going to apply some of these principles into my own interview style because I watch my own episodes back because I want to learn. I've got an athlete brain, and that's just how I conceptualize things. And then seeing that breakdown of the Diary of a CEO and how it compares to other things. Hopefully she doesn't, or I don't know, whoever that person is, fantastic channel, great video. It's going to blow up even more. God bless. Hopefully they do more breakdowns of that. I'm going to probably click on the other video and maybe do a streamer reaction of that. But awesome. First video was great for Mark Manson. That video was great. A little bit less than an hour stream today on this beautiful Saturday. So, get you some more coffee. I'll pour a little bit here before we end this stream. And then once again, my podcast is called Something for Everybody. It's on all major podcast platforms. And I would love for you to check that out. So wherever you're watching right now, please like, subscribe, drop a comment, and say hello. And if you want direct links to my podcast every time they drop, please text me at my number, which is 201-534-3681.